Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here on a beautiful spring afternoon. If you had a chance to take a look at the little preview that I set up, this is one of my favorite people on the planet. I can't even tell you how much this person means to me. And one of the very few people that I can say that when I was married, that I always felt like if I was going to have someone else on this planet represent a perfect partner for my wife, this is the guy that I always thought would be the perfect guy. Somebody that's near and dear to my heart and will be to yours shortly. This is my friend Luke Duran. Thank you for being here, buddy.
Hey, brother. It's so good to see you.
You too.
I love your smile.
Oh man, I miss it. I miss yours. Yeah, I like that we've got some representation from the area back behind you. There's a lot of Yellowstone artwork back there.
Yeah, I thought we could talk about art a little bit today if you're in the mood. And
Yeah.
on this side here, I've got some Derek Hess art from the 90s and one of my favorite rock artists. And he's a great guy with a great story if you're ever interested. So
Is he in Montana?
No, he's from Cincinnati, I believe.
Okay.
And he's very, very open and public about dealing with depression and bipolar. And
Okay.
so he does a lot of great stuff for mental illness awareness. And in the 90s, he did this string of fantastic concert posters. This is one for the Jesus Lizard there.
Oh, yes.
All that era of Soundgarden and Ministry, a lot of the grunge stuff. But now he's doing kind of more on the fine art sort of prints and posters, and they're beautiful. It's great stuff.
I love that you stay connected with so many, the visual artists. For people that don't know, Luke has a whole bunch of different hats that he wears. We first got together to play music in 1988, 89, summer of 89, I think. I just started college and we went on my first tour together. I got to join your cover band. So at that point it was Scirocco Jones, right? So a tip of the hat to Dave Rummins and Jill Clary at that point, Jill Phillips. And I think you had Eric, right? Is it? No.
He was a little before my time. We had Brad on the drums right before you.
Brad, yeah, absolutely. Here's another tip to Brad. So Scirocco Jones back in the late 80s, man. And that was what propelled our rock experiences together. And then you were in the art program there at Montana State. So I'd see you around, and you were a graphic design student there.
That's right. We were just one building away. You were in the music department and I was in the graphic studio, and same time frame. It was a great place to meet and a great time to be in Bozeman, Montana, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was, man. I actually started in your building there in Haines. I was an art major first. And
I did not know that.
Yeah, just because Dad's a painter and a printmaker and a sculptor, and I kind of went in that direction at first, but music was my heart, so yeah, we were 100 feet away from each other when you were next door. But I think I didn't realize your depth in art and sort of design. You'd always been a studious art pursuer, right? So I know that you were always studying fonts and color and style and sort of like refined graphic design for commercial work. But then, I got to see a lot of your rock side of things, right? When you started doing rock posters back in the day. So you really, do you have a massive portfolio of your evolution over decades?
I have a lot of stuff. Yeah, I actually, if it's not too egotistic, I got a couple slides and I can do some show and tell with you.
Yeah. I would love it. What I can do, I'll make sure that you're a host and you can share your screen.
Okay, cool.
Is that good? You want to do it that way?
Yeah. You bet. And I would love, so if we're talking art, I've got to tell you, I don't know if I've ever told you my personal story of my little epiphany of how I got into graphic design as a career and what kind of drove me towards the creative arts for a lifestyle. So we got time for a little.
Man, this is it. This is a great way to start. Absolutely. You bet. You do that and I'll get you set up as a host.
Okay. The time, it's February 1980. So a long time ago. I was 10 years old and I lived about 8 miles out of town. So I used to ride a school bus in the morning to school. And there was an older kid named Mark Anderson, I think was his last name. And one day, back in the day when school buses actually had 8-track players, he brought in an 8-track of Back in Black from AC/DC. And, to my little ears, I had grown up on like mariachi music and classical music and stuff that my parents listened to, some Sam Cooke and some cool soul music. I had never heard metal, never heard rock. And when that ringing bell came on, and I'm in
Oh,
this school bus, 10 years old,
oh,
and the Mutt Lange production of those guitars, it hooked me in that
yeah.
second. And I thought, what is this godlike music? And I want to make that. I want to listen to it and I want to play it. Well, that's half of the story. A month or two later, I begged my mom to take me to Bozeman to Kmart so I could buy Back in Black
Oh,
and hear the rest of the album. And she didn't let me get it that time because there was a neighbor there who was like, that's the devil's music. And you should, you know.
oh.
So I didn't get it that day, but I think I snuck around, or I finally convinced her to let me buy it shortly thereafter. And this is what I
There
got.
it is. Look at
As you
that.
all know,
Oh,
yeah, I mean, this vinyl, when I saw this, it's simply a black album cover. And in the original that I had, even the logo, the AC/DC, was not outlined in white. It was
that's
just
right. All black.
embossed. So you could just feel that. And so is the Back in Black. I had that epiphany right then when I saw this and held it in my hands that, oh my gosh, the power of this cover, because you know nothing about the band, you don't see photos
Right.
of them, you have no idea what music lies, on the vinyl in here.
Yeah.
Um, it came home to me understanding the power of graphic design, that what you could do is something as simple as this to create this mystery and this power. I thought that's what I want to do, and that just led me on this great path of fantastic 80s heavy metal album covers. The Priests
Yeah.
and the Corpse and the Iron Maiden and Crocus and all those great covers. I knew I wanted to do that, and it was a perfect melding of music and rock and design that just captured my heart, and I've been doing it ever since.
Man, I have a goose in the background blowing his nose with allergies. Yeah, no, it's my son. But you know,
Hey, mother.
I I love that you brought that up, because one of my favorite things that you do in your social media platforms is to share album art love. You've got the title of the Facebook page, and you've got the Instagram handle, and so album art love, where you and other people can share iconic albums that speak to them, right, with their
Right.
sort of either their simplicity or their sort of complexity. But you mentioned the simplicity there, the piece with Back in Black, because there is so much that you can convey without saying it all, right? And just like you said, you do that so much in your work, and that translates into a lot of the really successful graphic design stuff that you've been sought after, right? Like some of the simplest logos. And
Yeah, I mean, a lot of so there's kind of different philosophies of design and different styles, and everybody has their unique style. To me, that's one of the most important elements of design. It's just typography, and it's amazing to me still, after doing this for 30 plus years, that there's 26 letters in the English alphabet, and how many ways can you draw an F or
right.
a G, and then assemble those and add some cool tails and some flips and some bevels and color. How much you can do in design with simply 26 letters. And I think you see that a lot in a lot of album covers. Look at Kiss, you instantly know
Right.
what those letters look like, or the
Right.
Scorps, they have that cool 80s Pac-Man kind of
Yeah.
font. So much of their Dokken, I mean, they all just they rely on just that type, even without an image. And
That
I just find that so powerful and
the
creative.
the brand, right? I mean, the good brand identification is something that you really have a great handle on. Do you feel like when you first went to school for this and you got your degree at Montana State, did they focus on brand development, or is that something you just picked up as you sort of practiced?
That's a really good question, because when I was in college, as you know, back in the late 80s, early 90s, I was actually in the last graduating class of MSU design that had no computer experience. We didn't have any classes on computer. So it fit me well, because from middle school on, I had my little peachy folders and my trapper keepers. And that's all I was doing, was drawing mythical beasts and band logos, Iron Maiden logos on my peachy folders. So I didn't even know it back then, but I was learning about typography, how those letters fit together and how to render them. So that really translated into kind of the style that appeals to me.
That's
And I'll show you some examples of that if you want to see.
yeah. You know, one thing that I love that you do, and so I know that you do a little bit of workshop development as well. So you teach sort of not only typography, but you teach sort of style development, or at least helping somebody find their voice, which I think is really fascinating. You have a great way of pointing out things that people take for granted a lot. So if you drive by a sign, because I noticed that you'll post an evolution of a logo. You know, you'll say, this is what NASA's logo used to look like. You just yesterday you had the meatball and the worm, right?
That's right.
And talked
Yeah,
about
good.
and it's something that I didn't even notice. A lot of people sort of just overlook that kind of stuff, that it's just, oh, there's a logo. Of course, it represents such and such company, but the meaning behind the logo or what it represented, and then as it evolved, which agencies got a hold of it and said, hey, you know, we really need to help this brand evolve. Fast food industry, you've done a bunch of stuff on that, right? The fast food logos that have changed and how subconsciously it can kind of catch your eye, right? So
Yeah, it's really interesting how, you know, and a lot of ego is involved with this, I'll be honest. Or when a new marketing agency gets a big account like Burger King or something, they want to put their mark on the brand.
right.
And I guess I didn't answer your question about brand, but we didn't talk about brand when I was in college. That was kind of a newer term. We talked about logos and we talked about design, but brand and brand consciousness is really a huge part of communication today.
Sure.
And that's now we refer to it that way. But in brand, you know, those agencies, they want to put their mark on it, and sometimes they'll convince the board or the CEO that they need a new logo. And I would say 7, 8 times out of 10 it's not necessary, and you lose cachet, you lose relevance, and you lose history when you try to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes it's necessary, I'll
Sure.
give you that, and I've been involved with a few of those. But what you see a lot in pop culture and fast food, like you mentioned, you see some brands re-embracing their old logos and going back to something that was, you know, cool and iconic in the 1950s or 60s. All of a sudden it's cool again.
Right.
um,
The
and then
nostalgia,
sometimes, I'm sorry.
the nostalgia element is probably what attracts people, right? They remember what they saw when they were younger. And so that helps
Exactly.
identify. Okay.
And that was my comment on the NASA logo. You know, if you grew up in the 50s and 60s during the space race and people are trying to get on the moon before Russia, you identified with that meatball logo, and
Right.
that was the blue sphere, a blue planet with a little red swoosh through it that indicated or symbolized aeronautics. That was near and dear to you. And
Yeah.
here comes the new agency in the mid 1970s that's going to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, we need something to modernize NASA. Well, that was the generation of you and I. We were
Right.
kids in the 1970s. So we were familiar with this red NASA called the worm logo, which was just kind of like the CNN logo. It was just
Right.
red letters all working in a line. And so our generation, and maybe the generation younger than us, identifies with that logo. Well, in 1991, NASA decided to go back to the meatball logo and re-embrace their roots. I'm a little conflicted about that one, NASA in particular, because, you know, I like the red logo. And
Right.
so my commentary on that is it's cool that they're keeping both logos.
Mhm.
They're using them both in different capacities. And I think that unites generations together. It's like we all are invested in NASA and space exploration and success. We can all identify with it because they're using those logos.
I love
So
it. You know, the great thing about that is you can communicate this to anybody that might not be a design student, or even somebody that's familiar with why they use brand identification to market things, because everybody consumes at some point, right? We're all consumers of products or technology or anything like that. So the technology logo, everybody on the planet knows what the Apple logo represents. Everybody knows the Nike swoosh, right? And so um, and I know that you've talked at length about that sort of development, that whatever designer came up with that particular logo that personified that brand for decades, for generations beyond, there's no way the Apple logo is probably going to change, right? Because that's, you'd
exactly.
hope. Or the Nike swoosh is the same thing, right? It's a global international brand. Nobody can mistake it for something else. Um, But color is another really important part, right? You talked about the worm, and what I notice as a web designer, people can't articulate necessarily what they like or dislike about certain websites, but they can tell you how they feel about it. And color is such a huge part of artistic feel. How do you approach something with color and represent something that might not be so overt, right? If it's forested or
Yeah.
talking about environment, does it have to be a green tree, right? So how do
Yeah,
you approach,
exactly.
and how do you talk to a client to convey the importance of color?
Yeah, that's a great question too. And I can cut that cake two different ways. And I'll talk a little bit about political design and how that's different. When you're thinking about a brand, it's all about, you have, number one, you check your ego in at the door. It's not what you want. It's understanding the audience of who is going to see this, whether it's um, consumers, or if it's owners of the brand, or if it's who their target audience, whoever they're trying to reach. You choose colors based on what best conveys or is most effective in that brand that you're trying to communicate. And so, like you mentioned, green and environmentalism, that's a double-edged sword, because I can think off the top of my head, some great logos, environmental logos like Patagonia and Columbia. There's no green in
Right.
those. But Timberline and a lot of brands you see in Oregon, to be honest, there's a lot of green there.
Right.
So you really have to see, what is the competition, what's out there, what's been done before, how do you make your brand distinctive but still loyal to what you're trying to communicate. So it's a lot of different parts, moving parts, that you have to just kind of organize into this machine that runs smoothly. And there's a lot of mistakes and a lot of missteps you can make, and sometimes you're allowed to correct with that.
You know, so when I asked, how you convey that to a client, you mentioned you have to check your ego at the door. It's a really important thing, but there's so much subconscious, right, that happens in design, the
Oh yeah.
subliminal messaging behind design, and it relates to both what you do in your commercial design, but also this evolution that you seem to have had with your health, right? Looking at
That's interesting.
what our culture and our environment has sort of forced people to eat, right? And using, because there's a lot of documentary work right now on things like Fast Food Nation and Forks Over Knives and
Supersize me and all
Supersize
those.
Me, all those things. You're right, where the subconscious part of mass media forces you to eat bigger, unhealthy but cheaper. You're right, and you've had sort of a new rebirth in your health focus as well. So it's like you understand the subliminal, you understand the subconscious because of your art background, but also you can see how much healthier it is internally and up here, right? So
Yeah.
tell me about like the subconscious part, because I really there's so much to marketing. And when I think about marketing, graphic design is so much about marketing, right? So you've almost got to
Oh
wear
yeah.
two hats when you talk to a client, because you understand their goal, right? But
Yeah.
you want to help them.
And I think you've probably gotten a little taste of that too. A traditional graphic designer in the 60s or 70s was really a draftsperson
Mhm.
working at a big drawing table. And they were maybe drawing outlines or symbols or thinking about symbology. But now, I mean, you're a web designer. I'm sure people ask you for logos. I'm sure they ask you for digital art. They ask you for printed items. We have to wear a lot of hats in the graphic design world these days. And I think, when you're fresh out of college or you're trying to establish yourself, a lot of people really want to wear all those hats and try to please everybody. And yeah, I can design websites and I can do logos and I can design for publications or whatever it is. I really think you need to distill down and find out what you're passionate about, number one, and what you're good at,
Mhm.
and then go with those. And you're outstanding with web design. You're really good, and you've got your network, and you know how to connect to people to get the stuff done. That's huge. Um,
But I'm
so I
guilty.
guess
I'm guilty of trying to be the jack of all trades and master of none.
you don't want
I
to
cer-
disappoint.
no, I totally get it. Yeah, because you don't want to give somebody lesser quality in one particular item. It's better to, as you said, distill down, find your passion. When you have to communicate these messagings, you said that you were going to talk differently about political graphic design. So much of
Yeah.
that is subconscious. So let's talk about the difference between creating a logo for, say, a Patagonia versus for a senatorial candidate.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Can I do a little show and tell? I'll share
Yeah,
my
please.
screen here.
You got it.
Okay. Let's do this. I'm not too savvy with Zoom. I'll see if I can do this here. All right. Okay. So just a little background. Can you see that?
I can, you bet.
Okay. This is just a little example of some of the kinds of graphic design that I do, and I'll get to the political. So it primarily, I'm glad that you do web design because there's people that need you, and I'm not good at it. So I think I've even referred a couple clients to you.
Yeah.
I used to do a lot of web design, but just I was not that great at it, and it took me 5 times longer than what it would take other people who were really good at code and whatnot. So my focus is really on print design, and that's what I'm passionate about. It started with those album covers, holding something in my hand. So I do a lot of print work. You mentioned license plates and the kind of promo leading up to this.
Yeah.
Some vehicle graphics. I worked with your other awesome friend guest Rob McLean on some vehicle graphics and signage and stuff, billboards. And then I do swag for events and things. This is a whole identity I did for our Fish and Wildlife Agency here in Montana over the last few years.
Stunning. That's gorgeous.
Thanks. My real passion, though, is publication design. I like the long form. I like collaborating with editors and writers and photographers. So these are a couple of magazines that I've designed, just different brands, different things. And then my bread and butter one is Montana Outdoors Magazine. And I'm coming up on my 20th year working as the art director of this magazine, which is just crazy, man. I just can't even believe
it really is incredible. The simplicity that you talked about early on, photography is you've got amazing photographers that contribute to the magazine, but the way that you integrate this beautiful photography with simplistic design in that magazine, I'm sure you've won awards for this publication. You have to have, because it stands above most that I've seen.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we have. We're part of what's called the Association for Conservation Information, and it's all communicating agencies that deal in the conservation or wildlife world. And we've actually won Magazine of the Year maybe like 8 times out of the last 20 years. So that's pretty cool. It's a big feather in the cap. I'm so lucky because I get to work with the most talented artists and photographers. I've got a database of over 1,000 photographers. And in those years that I've been working here, I've been able to build those relationships and know who to go to for a great elk photo or who does underwater photography. And I can suss that stuff out.
Oh my God, look at that.
Yeah, isn't that cool? Big old bull trout. I'm just so grateful that our rinky-dink little magazine with just a subscribership of about 50,000, these world-class National Geographic photographers want to work with us. It's really a privilege. So
even it's amazing because color has tied so many of those things together too. As you look back through these other photos and these other pages, everything that's tied together, the color accent and fonts and things that are they're not distracting, but they contribute. There's a reference to the Western font, but it's not your traditional Rockwood, right? I mean, you've got Rockwell, sorry, but
right.
But these references to the theme behind the photo, but color is such a huge part of all that. You got the accent of the sort of rustic reddish color from her dress there in the highlight.
That's right.
I mean, it's beautiful. Those are the subconscious things that people don't really pay attention to when they see signage or print design, but it's what catches your eye, and you've mastered it. I love it.
Oh, Kevy, this is why I love you so much. You are such a great friend, and you see this stuff, and that just warms my heart. I love you, brother.
But you coach a lot of people, right? I mean, I know that you've done some workshops and you've taught some graphic design, and I know that when you were doing that, you were setting up a bunch of workstations where you had digital format being the primary sort of mechanism that you're using. How has sort of technology affected design for you? You mentioned being a print, like a pen and paper guy early on, but how has use of computers and design changed for you?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I was the last graduating class. I don't know how to get out of my stop sharing here. Let's
Oh
see.
yeah, it should be down at the very bottom. There you go.
Oh, okay. Did I get it?
Oh, now let's see.
Sorry.
That's no problem. I think there should be an option. There you go. You got it. Cool. All right. So yeah. So your students and the way that technology has changed you.
Yeah. So I learned in the old school way of graphic design with typesetters, and we would literally use photocopiers to cut out our art with our scissors and our X-Acto knives. You probably remember the day.
Yeah.
And we would put warm wax on the back of those and place them in our grid in our layout. And those were called mechanicals. And my first job out of college was working for a newspaper. And that's exactly what we did. We had these big sheets that were the size of a newspaper page, and we would arrange those elements, kind of building blocks, onto that page, how they fit. And sometimes, if you've got a column of a news story and it ran 2 lines too long at the bottom of the page, you had to snip those off with an X-Acto knife and paste them up on the next column. So
Oh wow.
I'm really grateful for having that education and learning in the trenches of physical manual design, because I think it really helps in the digital world, visualizing the grid, visualizing the space you have to work with. It was a real blessing that I got to work through that transition from manual paste up to digital art. Nowadays, I don't even pick up a pencil anymore, I'll be honest.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And that's, I look at the work your dad does, just blows my mind. And that's all still manual. It's still from his brain to his fingers.
Right.
And Kevin, I'm thrilled that you're going to do a tour of his studio soon.
Oh,
That's
you caught that. Yeah.
awesome.
That's the only way.
Yeah.
The only way I could get him on camera is to have him talk about his work. So, but
I'm looking forward to that one.
Do you feel like you lose some of it that way, that you actually don't have? I mean, because your stuff is so creative, do you feel like you lose a little bit of the tactile representation of what your brain sees?
I used to, but yeah, that used to really bug me. But even then, back when it was all physical manual, I think about these kick-ass like airbrush artists and
Right.
graffiti artists and people who could do stuff that I couldn't even dream of doing. There's always people who could do something better than you, always. And so I was always dealing with that kind of angst that's like, I see this album cover in my head, but I can't get there because I don't have the chops, but I do have those chops in Photoshop. So transitioning to a digital world was kind of good for me. There's still, I see stuff out there, especially in video,
Yeah.
that just blows me away that I'll never be able to figure out. But that's part of the passion. That's part of the art and the process, is loving and admiring what other people are doing, incorporating a little bit of that style into your own work and moving forward. So it's been nice to bridge that divide.
I love that you call it a process, right? Because some designers get complacent. They feel like, oh, I got it.
Yeah.
Got my degree. I'm set to go. I'm a designer, and this is what I'm going to be.
Right.
You seem to really study trends. You understand like evolution, because, getting into the political side of things, because you've done so much analysis. I don't know how you find the time that you're already doing so much campaign work, but then you analyze evolution of people's campaign brands, and you can see what may have worked in the 80s doesn't work now. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like how, when I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about any particular candidates you're working with right now, but you've worked with some biggies, right? And I know you've been involved.
Let me share my screen again.
All right, let's do it.
And so, but I want to address something that you just commented on that's really profound too. Can you see that?
Yep.
One thing I love about the magazine and all the publications I do is that it is all process. I get to go back and create another issue 6 times a year and improve upon what I've done in the past and try to make it better. And that is such a privilege in a job, to get to reinvent every time. I mean, I feel so privileged and so lucky to be able to do that, to get to go revisit and do it again and do it better.
Okay. So let me ask you about that.
Yeah.
You said do it better and this process. So you came out with a publication, the last publication you came out with, you said you wanted to do it better. art is so
Yep.
subjective, right? So what makes it quote unquote better in your eyes?
Better is okay. So in graphic design, which is very different from fine art, if
Right.
you're a fine artist, you are putting your brand, your creative brand on whatever you're producing, and it's your style. And it's okay if your style evolves over the years. I mean, your dad again is another great example of that. But for me, it's refinement and it's stepping out of the way. A graphic artist is not creating stuff for you to marvel at and to look at. It's putting forth it's more about communication, really. So it's about stepping out of the way and letting that gorgeous photograph speak for itself
Mhm.
and letting it complement the words. And so, like you noticed, I'm choosing colors and things that complement the photo, but don't step in the way of it and say, "Hey, look at me," instead of this
Right.
beautiful photo. That's to me, it's that refinement, and it's making each issue cleaner, less egotistic, less just stepping out and just
Mhm.
letting the words and the images speak. So
When
I'll
you're
jump over this too because this is just logos I do, but I know you want to talk politics. So
Oh, well, you know what? The thing is, because we talk, when we're talking about art of any kind, fine arts, graphic design, music, and it's a subjective thing that to say one thing is better than the another. And you said refinement and being able to maybe allow the piece to speak for itself. That works in fine art as well, right? So
sure.
a piece of abstract art might really speak to someone and have absolutely zero connection with someone else. And that's the beauty of art, right? So
Oh, absolutely.
in graphic design, if you're thinking about agencies will sit down with a company and almost force feed their design to sell product, sell widgets, if you will, right? And then they
Yeah.
have test marketing. They've got a panel of people that will say, 80 out of 100 people favor this logo over that one, and it's better, quote unquote, better because more people chose it, right? And in a way, I mean, it does speak to those people, right? I mean, there's something about a logo or a part of the brand that communicates with a mass market. And that is kind of where we get to with mass marketing, product design, and of course, campaign driven stuff, because they're trying to get the widest demographic to appeal to their logo, right? So,
Nailed it. Yeah, exactly. And that's a fine line to walk because when you're a fine artist, you're doing that art for yourself first. Obviously, you want to be successful and you want people to buy your art. But for a designer, putting out a publication or designing a logo or whatever it is for a client, it's not about you. It's about communicating the most effective way of what they need or what
right,
their desire is or what they need to sell. There's a really famous story of when Steve Jobs left Apple in the late 80s or was kicked out basically.
right.
And he started his other company called Next. And he hired, I don't know, I'm forgetting the name right now, one of the godfathers, the grandfathers of graphic design. The Saul Bass? I can't remember. Anyway, and he said, okay, I'm going to pay you X amount of money and give me 4 logos to choose from. And this guy said, no, you're going to pay me, I think it was like $50,000 or $100,000, something like that. You're going to pay me this amount and I'm going to solve this solution for you and give
Mm,
you one solution. I'm not going to give you choices.
okay,
And he did. And it was a cool logo, but I wouldn't have that much ego invested in it. I would think, yes, that's more about you as the artist or as the designer rather than giving you what you need, giving the
sure.
client what you need.
Okay.
So it's again, there's another double-edged sword there.
Well, well, you walk it in a way that, I mean, obviously, anybody that had a particular ego enough would limit the amount of like jobs coming in, right? There are going to be companies
Yeah,
out there that say, well, all right, that guy's got a major ego, we'll pay for that ego because we want a type of design. But for the most part, how to walk the line of making sure the client is taken care of, but providing them a piece of Luke. When I look at the series of logos here, you've got 20 logos on this page, and there's a diversity there. There's representation of each brand really well. I've seen the Lewis and Clark Humane Society logo that you did. I love that one
oh,
so much. It
thanks.
really, the silhouette of the cat inside the dog. You've got the heart representing, this attention for animals. It's beautiful, and then there's a warmth to the serif font, and I just, and actually even that one, if I talk about color, from what I see, right, it's a neutral color. It doesn't alienate male or female. There's a real great combination of male and female type dominant colors. There's a
Yes.
color reference in the logo. And so I just, I mean, I could go through each one of these and point out those things that I love. I mean, the Make It Happen Montana. I remember when you came out last year, 2 years,
Yeah,
was it?
about a year ago.
Yeah. You came out with the whole brand package where you can get those stickers, and it was, you have mobility in a lot of your design, and not just motion, but it seems like you are able to, it's almost like you form activists, behind what you do. Because you really, because there's a message there that's positive all the time in the stuff that I see you do. Even if you look at like the series of logos, Gifted and Talented Program, and Peak, and Serve Montana, Make It Happen, all these really productive, the Friendship Center. I mean, look at all this stuff. This is, again, graphic designers oftentimes will take the easy buck, right? And so you'll see Shell logos, Shell oil. And you've, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but it's pretty amazing that you can see that type, because that's your personality. Since I've known you, you are forward thinking, you're positive, you're productive. And I think that's why we gravitate towards each other. I just love that sense in you. And so I like that there's a piece of Luke in every one of these logos. You want to pick any one of these out of here and talk about the experience that you had with a company that started from nothing and evolved into a new sort of, because you mentioned a whole brand identity.
Yeah, I so appreciate that, Kevin. And gosh, you unpacked a lot right there. But I gotta say too, you're right. It's why I'm attracted to you. Why we are such good friends. The optimism in you is always, that's one of the first words that comes to mind when I think of you. And I'm glad you touch on that. I do like to convey a sense of optimism when it's appropriate to whatever I'm designing. So I'll pick out, how about the Department of Labor and Industry? That's that blue one in the middle, because that is one of the most subtle designs out of all of these. Mm-hmm. And so what we're talking about here is a state government agency. So you think of state government agencies and you think of suit and ties and kind of stuffy and not a whole lot of creative latitude or expressive latitude, just duty to the public, duty, right. Responsibility to whatever you're in charge of. In this case, it's jobs and unemployment, which is very relevant right now. So what I wanted to do, how do I get some optimism into that logo? Well, I usually see something in my head in the process. And then I'll usually go beyond that first idea and I'll design 5 or 10 or 20 logos. But 90% of the time, it's the first idea in my head that gets chosen. And in that case, this is one of them. I saw a working gear, a turning wheel, the idea of work and labor and movement. And then just adding those little dots around the outside of this gear, all of a sudden it's a bunch of workers holding hands around the gear.
Love it.
Yeah. So there's energy, there's motion is really important. I think logos have to move, and you'll see a lot of that in my political logos. And then you mentioned color. There's a lot of color temperature. And most of the colors you see on this page are warm. They're on the warm side of things, especially when it comes to like that Humane Society logo, the library, things that are welcoming, things that are human, that you want to connect to. And so that's where a lot of that comes from.
And then you evolve into the political side, right? So I was just thinking, right? Yeah. So, I haven't seen the slideshow, but I can feel where you're going. So I know. Yeah. Okay. So cool. So tell me about this transition.
So I got really lucky. As you know, we were playing in bands. We were rocking out in Portland, Oregon, and I was working as a designer there. You were all over the map doing kick-ass stuff with design and performance and music. And, I love that about you. I love that you cannot be pigeonholed into one role.
It's called
for me. Yeah. And a lot of energy. we could get personal here a little bit, but
Yeah.
I was kind of faced with an ultimatum from my wife at the time to go back to Montana. And I had lived out in Portland, Vancouver area for close to 10 years, and I loved it there. I loved my life in Pacific Northwest. I loved being able to grow bamboo and the green there and just the culture. It was wonderful. I had spent, and I've heard you talk about this in other interviews, I'd spent my entire childhood trying to get out of Montana and
Mm,
trying to get away because I was convinced something was better
right.
outside of the borders of the state. And in many ways, there are. Um, so being forced with this ultimatum to move back to Montana was really hard for me. And I was about 30 years old at the time. Um, but, did I want to stay married and have kids? If I did, I had to move back to Montana because my
Okay.
wife had already taken a job in
Right.
Helena, Montana. And I was in between jobs, so I really didn't have an excuse to stay.
Right.
um, so I came back to Montana in 2002, right after 9/11. And I had never thought about politics before that. It just was not on my radar. I couldn't care less.
Sure.
But when you move to Helena, Montana, or Salem, Oregon, or wherever there's a capital, a state capital, you can't help if you're plugged into your community, you cannot help but get sucked into at least some degree of politics,
Sure.
and it forces you to decide, what's important to you, and what do you stand for, and who are the good people doing the work that you believe in. And I got lucky just out of the blue. This is a photo of John Tester. And he, at the time, was the Senate president of Montana's state legislature.
Okay.
So he was a good Democrat. He was a band teacher in high school, a high school band teacher. He was a butcher. He is an organic farmer. He was Jeff Amon's teacher
Oh,
from Pearl
really?
Jam. Yeah.
Wow.
So
Okay.
there's a great connection back there in Big Sandy, Montana. It's this little tiny rural farm town near the Canadian border. Anyway, he decided to run for the U.S. Senate, and as we all know, there's 50 seats in the U.S. Senate, so that is a very elite group of and very powerful group of people.
Right.
And I just got tapped to create a logo for John Tester. I knew a couple people, and I had some family members who were connected politically, working in the legislature, or were lobbyists. And they're like, "Hey, I know, my uh, brother-in-law is a graphic designer. Let him take a crack at this."
Oh, now hold on a
And
second.
yeah,
Usually, when someone says that, people cringe, like, "Oh, great. Okay, the brother-in-law who can design. Cool. So he's going to have Microsoft Paint and a couple of crayons." Okay.
it
So
looked like a sketch on the back of a napkin. Yeah.
okay, so this all right. So you got recommended anyway, like inside. There's a warm recommendation.
I was recommended. I hadn't met John Tester at the time, but my wife at the time, Jerry, was working for Planned Parenthood, and so pro-choice is a big campaign platform for Democrats. He is
Mhm.
a Democrat, and so he had a couple of very personal one-on-one phone conversations with Jerry. And I all of a sudden was just thinking, I really like this dude. His values are so close to mine. And so I jumped on the phone during one of those conversations and said, you don't know me and you've never seen any of my work, but, I think I can raise your profile to the next level.
Wow.
And in Montana, it's a huge state and it's very rural. And, there are sometimes hundreds of miles between towns. So in order to catch attention in Montana politics, you have to have a lot of visual stuff out there.
Sure.
Nowadays, it's mostly TV. But so he took a chance with me, and this is the very first logo I designed for him, and
Right.
it's just type. There's a little star, a
Yeah.
little symbol in there, but it's very clean, very basic, and this is the type of design that I'm attracted to
Sure.
personally. And it
Well,
was great because this campaign manager was questioning everything. It's like, why is that S and that T connected, touching
hmm,
each other in the middle of the logo and stuff? And it really allowed me to explain and justify every single element of this logo and why it was necessary and why it would work. And they took a shot. And here's another example of how, like, I get to reinvent the magazine with every issue. It's the same with political design. So this is the logo I first came up with back in 2004, about when he decided to run for Senate.
Okay.
I got to update it. I slightly changed the color of the yellow. We added a tagline for yard signs and for big highway signs that went all the way across the state. He came back to me 6 years later for his reelection campaign in 2012. And he said, I want a little more sense of place, because this is Montana and I'm a farmer.
Yeah.
And, half or a big portion of my constituents are rural and they connect to the land. So I went back to the chalkboard and added, he has a very iconic barn on his farm. So I drew that, and I added in some of the Bear Paw Mountains that are in that Havre, Big Sandy area.
Beautiful.
And we kept the typeface because we needed that. Again, I talked earlier about throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
You need to hold on to some of those elements. And that's the branding. You need to hold on to identifiable elements that carry you through in new iterations. So in this case, it was the typography. So that didn't change.
When you mentioned the campaign manager that was also working side by side with John when you did the first logo, and you had to justify sort of the connection of the S and the T, and they may have asked, why the motion behind the star? I mean, when that person was second guessing, did John keep that campaign team throughout the re-election? Do you know?
Oh, that's such a great question, Kevin, because in the world of politics, at least in Montana, and I suspect in most places, they're just getting out of college with their political science degree, or they're specializing in running a campaign. These people move around and they are very, very temporary. And so with every campaign, you're dealing with almost a whole new set of people. So you've got your campaign team, which lifts you over the finish line and gets you elected. That's one group of people.
Sure.
But then, like, when John Tester is elected and he moves to Washington, D.C., he then is appointing a whole new staff who specialize in topics and things that are going to come up in the Senate. So he's got healthcare advisors and environmental and energy development and land and property rights, which is a very different skill set and a very different team of people around him than an election campaign.
Sure.
So a lot of those people move on to the next candidate, or they'll move to another state and say, who's running for Senate in this state? And they join those teams. So I am part of the institutional knowledge. I'm one of the only people who have stuck with him from the beginning. And that's the case with our governor in Montana. And a lot of people, they rely on me. I keep their photo libraries. I have all the photos of John Tester back to the early 2000s, and probably nobody else does.
Right.
Somebody's got to keep track of it.
Sure.
Well, part of my job becomes educating the next crew that comes in, and educating why we made these choices and why they're still important today, or why they need to be changed.
I think he's very fortunate, because you developed the passion for his platform early on, right? You could resonate with those things. They meant something to you. And then you believed in him enough to get behind him. Again, you put your ego in check, but you were able to convey what needed to be spoken for his logo in order to sort of help him keep the brand recognition. And then when I thought about this campaign team coming to you saying, well, they didn't come to you. You said that John came to you and said, hey, I really want to connect with my constituents. So having the rural market, if you will, associate me with their ideals, adding his iconic barn, adding the Beartooths, that probably was directly from him, I would bet, because of knowing a little bit about his personality. He is really in touch with his people. It doesn't seem like he's being told what to ask for or what to do. And so I could see him coming to you saying, Luke, between the time that I got elected and now in re-election, I really want to connect with my people. Help me get there. And it's great that he trusted you.
Oh, it's a real privilege. And it means a lot to me that people entrust something like that in me. And he's a no bullshit kind of guy. He's very genuine. He is very serious, and he's very effective. He is a really good senator.
Mhm.
And but for him to recognize that, I've been doing this for a while and he trusts me to help make some of those decisions visually for him really means a lot. It
Yeah.
really does. So this last example is when he ran again, in, I guess it'd be 2018,
Mhm.
his second reelection campaign. Again, we're dealing with a whole new staff. And by this point, John has stepped away because he's a busy dude. He's one of the
Sure.
most powerful people in the Senate, even representing Montana. So now I'm totally dealing with a new campaign staff. And
Okay.
I don't even, I had one very brief conversation with Senator Tester during this whole election campaign, reelection. They thought, we want to emphasize a little bit that he is an established senator. How do we do that? So all I did basically was just prominently feature the words U.S. Senate a little more boldly than we had in the past, but we kept with the identity. We updated the colors a little bit. They're a little more bold, a little more assertive,
Mhm.
a little more eye-catching, I think. So it's a real privilege to go back and reinvent and refine and retool and try to do a better job each time. And I hope he runs again in 6 years.
Right. Oh, what a neat evolution. You've done
Yeah,
this. You've shown a lot of these evolutions in all sorts of brands and logos, and it's one of my favorite things when you post on, like, say, Facebook or Instagram. You'll do an analysis of a brand evolution, and to me, it makes me look at everything so much differently. I'll look at
excellent.
I'll look at the logo on the refrigerator differently, or and my kids and I, we talk about it a lot. We'll drive by stores. Now they are clued into the fact that Comic Sans was invented by the devil, and so they whenever whenever they see a sign, unless it's a kindergarten, or like a preschool, they'll say, "Dad, it's a really poor use of typography for that logo." And I love that, but I think it's great for everyone to take a little deeper look at what they're being fed from the media, right? So
Oh, for sure.
in a good and positive, but in a negative way. I mean, positive and negative, because I've mentioned I stopped watching the news years ago.
Yeah.
There's enough news that I get, I think, to help sort of drive my life, that I can control a little bit of part of my life. But there's a lot of negativity that's being fed that I just it wasn't helpful to me anymore. It was unhealthy. I didn't like the anxiety that came to me through stuff that was being force fed to me, and so some of that, most of that stuff is subconscious, right? The media just they build fear, and this is not the tinfoil hat guy that's saying, that I don't trust. It's good to question, right? And so I love that your design and your evolution explains those things. It really is saying, just in case you didn't notice that NASA changed their logo in a certain way. My favorite observation you did was the comparison between the meatball NASA logo and the Space Force pew pew logo.
Oh,
whenever you point that out, you'll say, then there's the Space
uh,
Force pew pew logo. But it's amazing how blatant the plagiarism was. It really is unbelievable how it's just so we don't even have to go there, but it is
no,
something
but I want to for a minute.
okay,
Can
cool,
I go?
please. Yeah.
I'm going to go off
Yeah, go for it.
because that one to me was so offensive, not because it was a blatant ripoff. And I'm sure that one of Trump's sons designed that in paint, at late at night. What really pissed me off about that, I don't if anybody's seen the Space Force logo. What really pisses me off is not that they lifted direct elements from the meatball logo from NASA, but they used the Star Trek shield as the
Right.
center point of their logo. So they're melding NASA and Star Trek into this military logo,
Right.
basically. I mean, it's a branch of the military. What pisses me off so bad about that is Star Trek presents this beautiful future world where religions get along and everybody works together and they've solved environmental problems and they're all about discovery and peace.
Right.
To lift that and to repurpose it for military it gets under my skin.
You know what? If you hadn't pointed it out, I would never have even noticed. Honestly,
Oh,
and that
interesting.
Well, and I try to be more observant for those things, but I was so grateful that you did, because it does help me look at so many things in a different way. And it's important, for people to just kind of stop and look and observe. And,
Yes.
and I hadn't even thought about that connection, but you're right. The, go forth and prosper, sort of,
Right.
um, um, ideal is lost upon Space Force and what it's all about. But
Exactly.
the, you know, when I tie all of this together, I tie brand identification, use of sort of forward progressive thinking, and I think about you in music too. You know, I just in terms of the type of musician that you are, if we can go to that, we Luke, yeah, for those of you that don't already know, Luke is this incredible bass player who is such
Oh, I
a
don't know about that.
melodic bass player. You've got so much musicality. So you've got the low end kind of rhythmic thing that I love as a drummer, because there's, this driving force of those two units. But if they go back to like the 6 Days record that we did, right? Your bass playing is so unique, so cool. And I don't know any other bass player that plays anything like you. I could never say, I know that you were influenced by like Steve Harris in some places.
Oh, for sure.
But I would never say, oh, you can totally tell that Luke was such a Steve Harris fan that that's where he got everything from, because there's a composite of everything in there. Just like, your development of art as well. I mean, you've gotten so many campaigns and so many clients that are across the board, that you've developed your own sense of internal style, that I think that's why people keep coming back to you. But it's neat that music is that same sort of thing for you. I could see
Oh, for sure.
you love so many different styles. I have, well, the album art love that you post, there are so many records that you introduced me to, informative years for me. And
Oh, interesting.
I'm really grateful, right? Like Maggot Brain, that record, like you were the first person to play Funkadelic and Parliament for me. And when we were playing music together, Rage Against the Machine just came out, right? And so that was a totally different transition of music. Soundgarden, remember seeing Soundgarden together, like coming out here to Portland to visit, go to Salem,
Yeah,
and
remember that?
Soundgarden together.
That's awesome.
Oh my God. Yeah, there was so much power in the music then, and we were, just young bucks, like wanting to go out and conquer the world playing music. And I would think, as your music tastes have evolved, you have such a diverse. I know that if we went to your phone or your iPod or whatever you use for a device, I would bet if we picked out 100 songs, you're going to get every genre across the board. I would bet. Is there any country in your mix?
A little bit.
Okay.
I probably the only thing that's not in there is like Italian opera. It's
Okay.
just something
Yeah.
to connect with. But
Oh, Soilwork, man! You hit me to Soilwork, and you're like your Nordic metal, like fascination. It's unbelievable, man. So, yeah, like music was a big part of you growing up. Was your family? I know that your brother is musical. How about your mom and dad?
yeah, my brother played bass. He loves music too. He loves rock. My parents were not musical, like performing music, but we always had music in the house, and it was a really nice blending. My dad's Mexican origin, so we had some Mexican music in the house. I just remember when we still lived in LA, all my family, you would hear some of that mariachi music, which turns you on to brass.
Right.
And then my mom was listening more on like the crooners, Johnny Mathis and Sam Cooke and a lot of classical music. So we didn't really have rock in the house, and we lived out of town. So I wasn't, that's why AC/DC, when I heard Back in Black, just
Oh,
really, connected with me.
you bet.
But what I'm thinking about for both you and I, how fortunate we were to come up in an age where local music stores were still very relevant.
Mm,
I was so blessed that I got to work at Cactus Records in Bozeman for 4 or 5 years, and
yeah.
every person in that store had a different flavor, different style. So I was exposed to blues and jazz and more classical that I'd never heard, and easy listening even, which I probably never would have given given a shot to before.
Right.
So that was really magical. And not only that, but I know you worked at KGLT, didn't you?
That's
Back
right.
in the
Yeah.
day?
That's
So
right.
we had a local like public access radio station at our disposal too. And you remember the record collection in
Oh
there.
my God.
Yeah. We would go in there 1, 2 in the morning, and one
Yeah.
of our friends would be working there at night, DJing, and just thumb through all the vinyl there. There was so much to explore
Oh,
and discover.
yeah. We were fortunate for sure. Cause it was almost like, it was more than a kid in a candy store situation. The only reason
Yeah,
I even wanted the radio gig was so I could go in there and pilfer the records, cause they had
totally.
they had records that they were getting rid of, cutouts all the time. And then, and, being able to like burn them, but,
Yeah.
yeah, Dweezil Zappa. I remember like first discovering that shampoo horn record with you there. So yeah, um,
Right.
you're right. We talked a little bit about Cactus Records when I talked to Terry Courier the other day.
Yeah, for sure.
Music Millennium. It's amazing to me that Music Millennium has been able to like not only stay afloat, but they reinvented themselves when vinyl became a thing. But they were already there, and so Cactus was one of those places. We hopefully everybody that's listening had a place they could go to hang out on a Saturday afternoon and listen to all
Oh,
different styles of music and
yep.
everything, the smells. I think about the incense and all the little things, the posters and the swag and all the music accessories that you could go into and check out. Yeah,
Yeah.
those were formative years. And
Oh, and then to make it even better, they put in a coffee shop, and
right,
so I learned
right.
how to become a barista. So you go in and thumb through your vinyl and sip, an espresso, and that was heaven to a college kid.
Absolutely. And they welcomed you to stay. That was the thing.
Yeah,
I mean, most music stores, as things got more commercial, they just want you to come in and consume and get out. Right. But when Cactus was
sure.
there, they had, a place where you could sit down and put a record on, put headphones on and hang out and listen and talk and
Yeah,
socialize. Right. So
yep,
yeah, the community thing is really important.
it
Yeah.
is.
I
Huge shout out to Music Millennium because they're carrying the torch. They are a cultural treasure for Portland area.
yeah,
I'm so glad that they're doing well.
me too. Me too, man. Terry Courier is, he's as close to an idol of mine, I can't even say enough because he's given his entire life to it.
Yeah,
He really has. The time spent on making his community so involved in music, both in music education and it's never about pimping out his music store. He's just done so much to provide music to people, giving things away and, customer appreciation days where he'll just give away the farm. And it's because he loves the community. And the community thing is important. And I missed that part about Montana. There was something about Montana's community that Portland has some of that, but as you get into larger cities, there's this connection where musicians are less likely to support each other because they're competitive. I know in Montana right now, a lot of our friends in different cities around Montana are so supportive. They'll come out and they'll see each other's bands. They'll help promote each other's music. And especially right now where people are stuck at home in a pandemic and they can't get out there and perform, it's a really important thing to be supportive of each other, and
uh,
it's
that's something I learned from you, Kevin. I had to check myself a couple of times, and I've made some really stupid errors with musicians and with bands. You taught me. I've never ever heard you disparage a group, no matter how talented or how bad they were. You are so good at that.
oh,
I mean, you are everybody's friend in the music world, and that is such a beautiful thing. And how can you not grow and bloom from that kind of positivity and encouragement? And that's that community you're talking about, brother. I mean, that's such a gift to give to others.
well, I thank you for saying that. I think one place that really showed that up for me, in February last year, I went to Thailand for a couple weeks, and the guy that brought me over there, Brian Abrams, said, you have to go see this expat. He's a guy that used to teach in California University and decided to just get away from America and go play music. His name is Lee Shamrock. And he dresses up all green. He's got his little hat and he'll do 4 hours nonstop. There's like a comedic element. He's very Jack Black meets it's hard to even pigeonhole him, but he'll play nonstop with this comedy vibe. And he knew that I was a musician, so he brought me in to play cajon Actually, he walks everywhere
Cool.
in Bangkok. So he went to get me a cajon from someplace, God, like a long way away. And then I ended up playing like 8 shows with him over the course of a couple of weeks because he just kept bringing me out. We'd go to different cities and he'd say, "Hey, I'd really like you to play with me." Sometimes there'd be a drum set there, and he had this massive following. People would come out. Number one, there was an expat following. Americans would go out to see him play,
Sure.
but there was a huge Thai following that was following him too. And it was all about involving people. He'd go out in the audience and bring instruments for people to play. And, it showed me that it's not just a local thing. It's not just an American thing, but it really is that language, that universal language. I hate to sound cliche, but it really is about that. And you had said, even if there was a band that was really shitty that I didn't, point out, I tried to be diplomatic about when somebody would come up to me and I would see them and I thought, well, they're not my cup of tea. I try to find something positive to say. Like, I really, really like your outfits. Something that, at least if you can't say something nice, right, then don't say anything at all. And I saw that because I would see other people do press and they'd start dogging other bands. And when Everclear blew up in Portland, and all these people locally were saying, "Oh man, what a joke." They write one song and they just keep writing the same song over and over again. And to me, I'm thinking, you know what? They're laughing all the way to the bank, right? I mean,
Great.
it's working for them, and they're out there playing in front of millions of people. And the person that's complaining about it is playing in front of 20 people, can't get a gig booked on the weekend, and is jealous. And it's just insecurity, And so,
Or they're standing in the back of the room with their hands crossed,
right? And so,
judgmental look.
why stand there, right? If you're not into it, why stand there and waste your time, right? So I think it's really cool that right now a lot of people that are stuck at home, musicians are stuck at home, but they're expressing themselves with music. They're able to play and perform, and people that are supporting them, whether it's through PayPal and Venmo or buying records or buying a shirt for them. But I love the fact that at least the use of technology allows them for some sort of connection, and the community support is so huge that my whole sort of thing behind communicating with my friends is that I miss people. I love being able to travel, and I love this kind of thing when you and I could sit down together. But this kind of thing when you and I are together doesn't happen enough, right? I mean, it might happen once every couple of years. And so I would leave conversations with you and Helena recharged and inspired, because I'd walk out of there thinking, wow, that is somebody that was put on this planet to somehow come into my life. I feed off of your energy, and I feel blessed, man. I mean, really, I try not to use luck too much because there's fortune, but really there are a handful of people that I just feel like have been such a blessing to me to provide me guidance and inspiration. And, I find that with you all the way across the board, both with your art, your music, and also just you communicate your heart in a really amazing way. A lot of that's done, with your change in, I mean, you had your heart scare this year, which is mind blowing, but you also did major health changes over the last several years where diet became a big thing for you too. And so you want to talk a little bit about that, like this next chapter of Luke's life?
That sense of mortality that you start to feel as you get older, when you're young, you're in your 20s, your early 30s, it's all about you and maybe your material possessions, or this home you're building, or this relationship you're building, your marriage. And then you get into the parent phase, and your dad or you're a mom, and then your focus is on your kids. Well, I'm still there. I still got 2 kids, one in middle school, one in high school, and then 2 stepdaughters who are also high school, middle school. So I'm very much in family mode right now, but I'm also feeling that sense of mortality that I want to be around for a while. I'm an older parent, and so I want to be around for when my kids get married or when they have these big life moments. And that was the impetus or the spark for me to really start to take a look at my health. And I feel like I wasted a lot of years. I'm not judging anybody else, but I wish I hadn't been high and smoking pot through my whole 20s. I really regret that now, because I feel like it dumbed me down, and it limited my potential and my ability to accomplish things. And damn it, you can't take that back. If I had to do it all over again, I would have focused on creative energy rather than mellowing out and watching movies.
Sure.
So, but that's just me. But the other half of that is health. And, I had some indicators. I ate a lot of Burger King in my 20s, and I'm sure I was building up my arteries with cholesterol. And so I decided I'd had enough of it. And when I got divorced about 8-9 years ago, I really, I can't describe, the potential and the power of a good counselor and therapy. It did wonders for me. I really had to just stop in my tracks and assess my entire life and what I was in denial about, what was important to me, what I had let slide for so many years. And health was definitely one of them, and diet. So I went through some really intensive therapy. I dealt with some childhood stuff that I should have done 30 years before, and started eating and eating well, and lost a lot of weight. It wasn't enough, as you know. On Valentine's Day this year, I had a heart attack, and I've lost a lot of weight, but I still had that buildup in my arteries, and it finally came to call. So now it's nutrition phase 2 for me. I had a couple of stints put in, and I feel a lot better. And I saw, like you mentioned, documentaries about health a little earlier, and I had seen Super Size Me and some of those other ones before. And I thought, yeah, they're right, and I should do something about it. But I never took that full step. I saw a documentary called Forks Over Knives right after my heart attack, just days. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yeah.
Very medical. It looks at populations around the world over the last 100 years and comes to the conclusion that so much of the meat that we eat, it's too much, and your body suffers as a consequence. I'm not anti-meat at all. I love meat.
Yeah.
But for me, they one of the great examples they had was Norway during World War II. Everything was rationed, and nobody had meat for 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
Incidence of heart disease almost went to zero.
Wow.
And people's general health was a lot better. And it's really hard to deny, population-wide statistics like that. So I made the choice to go vegan right after my heart attack within a week. And it feels good in my heart because I'm not just eating better, but there's the whole ethical side of meat and commercial processing and whatnot. Again, I'm not anti-meat. I think if you hunt a deer or an elk in Montana, that is great free-range organic meat that's had a great life. Nothing wrong with that at all. But I feel really good, and I feel like I'm on the right path for me. And I'm not going to evangelize about it, but I'm happy to share with anybody who's interested.
That's the biggest thing. You've never been one to sit on a soapbox and tell somebody how they should be, but I know that, myself included, man, there are a lot of changes that I want to continue to make, to make my well-being both physically and mentally better. You touched on therapy right after your divorce, and you said it allowed you to be able to process and let go of some things. One of the things you could focus on was nutrition. I hadn't really planned to talk to you about it, but maybe what were some of the other things that you felt like you really needed to discover about yourself after divorce?
I had to, so I don't know how candid I want to get here too, but I had to focus for me on playing the role of an enabler for a long time with alcoholism and an addiction, and why I couldn't say those words out loud, why I had repressed those for 15 plus years was really a mystery and a puzzle to me. It's like, why was that so hard? And what example am I teaching my kids by repression? Or I just heard the phrase from Brene Brown the other day of parenting with guilt. And I that really made me pause and think about it. That's fascinating to me. And then I was doing a little bit of that, and I don't want to be that dude. You too. So,
Yep.
and So going back through that, dealing with some weird, not super traumatic, but things that stuck in my brain back to when I was 7, 8 years old that I just could not let go. Writing it out and talking about it with a therapist, I was finally able to give it wings and blow it away, with puff of air. And it's always there and it'll always be part of me, but I don't dwell on it anymore. And I don't feel anything negative about it anymore, which is a real gift. Really.
It's great that you can see that. I've seen it in you. Your friends really have. You've been really incredibly special to me for a long time, but there's some sense of grounding, some center that you found. And I wasn't sure if that was part of it. I didn't know where that side of Luke evolved from, but I'm really glad to see it. It's inspiring. I think you mentioned the kids, having your kids, not only, you're around for your kids by being better with health but we're modeling, right? So your kids are at a point right now where even if they might not say that they listen to you or watch you, they are. And if there's anything that we have, it's a legacy that you leave for your kids. And it's not the commercial type stuff you talked about, the money or the, sort of tangible items, but it's the character that you leave behind. And I think just integrity and dignity is something that's so important to me now. I recognize that. And I think it sounds to me like being able to at least identify where those things were with you and move past it was it was a transition. It was a healthy sort of evolution. You talked about enabling, and I think codependency is a huge part that goes along with that. And that's where, that was a big part of my life. I think a lot of people our age and our generation, as they kind of go through that a lot. And, sort of this understanding of what we are as individuals can contribute to a partnership is so important. Yeah, I'm excited about working on that kind of thing right now. But I love
Good for
seeing,
you, brother.
I just love seeing what has worked for people. So you're not an evangelist. I don't see you sitting on a soapbox saying, here's what I've done and this is what you should do. But it's great to see that from afar, I can see that the Luke Duran that is now, in 2020 is a more evolved and developed human being, integrous and dignified human being than you might have been 10, 15 years ago. And that's not to say that you were a piece of shit 10, 15 years ago, because you certainly were not, man.
Well, I had my moments.
we all do. Hopefully we have less of those as we go on, but so if you felt like therapy was a big part for you, then I say, man, it's something to, consider for all of us. It was a big thing for me too. I'm grateful, in recovery, I work the sort of recovery program where I've got a lot of rituals that I kind of go through to kind of help get my mindset right. Perspective is a huge part, not just about what we're talking about here, but everything to do with our life. When we
Would you
talk about,
share one or two of those? I'm curious.
yeah, I mean, just a gratitude journal right off the bat. My friend Janine
Awesome.
gave me a journal to just, it's a 5-minute commitment at most in the morning, that I wake up and I don't turn on the news. I don't open Facebook. I don't look at my email. First thing I do is I grab the book, and it's a stream of conscious thing that I just go, all right, what is something that I can be, what I want to focus on to let go of today? And then a couple of things that I'm grateful for. And it might be something really superficial. It might be that, I've got new coffee in the cupboard that I'm going to go dig into. But a lot of it has to do with my family being close. I'm so grateful right now to have both of my boys here with me. In quarantine, people are really sick of being around each other. I see it. But for me, when they weren't with me, when Caleb, had moved out and he wasn't here with me, I felt this disconnect, because I just wasn't ready to let go. Although I was fine with my kids flying the coop, but I get to grow with them right now. And so it's something I'm grateful for all the time. So that's the really main tradition that I have, because it can focus and sort of give me a perspective shift right off the bat. It helps me wake up on the right side of the bed,
That's beautiful.
Well, there are a bunch of great traditions that I have that a lot of my friends do. They exercise first thing they get up, and they'll just go out, take a walk around the neighborhood, and just at sunrise. And I think whatever anybody can do right now to be productive is so helpful. Because there are two ways to go, I think, right now with the way that the world is. You can you could be a victim because the entire world is a victim in some sense, right? But if you play the victim, then you're going to feel like things are futile and desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. It's just an uncomfortable, icky place to be. But if you have some sort of productivity and positivity, you lean on your community, and you just gear towards some positive. I think it affects everything in your life.
Everything.
I, it's sort of been thematic in some of the conversations I've had in, these little chats, that I ask people what they're grateful for right now. I thought about dedicating like a whole week of conversations to just tell me about your gratitude ritual. What do you do right now that you're grateful for? And if I were to ask you, I'd love to know, you've told us about a bunch of them already, but what do you feel like you're most grateful for?
Yeah. So something really immediate that comes to mind for me, I was very blessed to fall in love again after divorce and marry a wonderful woman and friend,
Yeah.
Marianne, my wife. And one thing I'm really grateful for is her path of healing and exploration is different than mine, but and she's an excellent parent. And I learn so much from her every day, and just who she is and how she carries herself about. But one thing specifically, she's a teacher, and she just finished her certification to become a yoga instructor.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, which is great because the definition of yoga is so broad, and it's not just learning the positions and going through a bunch of steps. She learned, there's a great resource here in Helena where she got her training, all facets of yoga and mindfulness and meditation and all of these things that come with that world. And so we've been doing a lot of that together.
Right.
When we're on road trips, we listen to mindfulness podcasts. We practice yoga together. We meditate, and it's really quality time to spend with someone you love. So I am so grateful for that. I always thought yoga was cool, but why didn't I do it for the
Right.
last 50 years?
Sure. Yeah. Oh, and meditation. That's so
Oh yeah.
hard when your mind is nonstop. That's the hardest thing. I still struggle with it a lot. I've got meditation timers, insight timers and guided meditations. And it's still one of those
Yeah.
things that, it's for me, it's a process, but you know, you
I
know,
think your brain works very similar to mine, and I've got an 8-track mind, and so often I'll have 2 songs going in my
right,
brain at the same time,
right.
and just being able to filter out one of those songs is I'm grateful for, and it
Sure.
does take major meditation to do that.
Well, a killer influence from Marianne. Yeah, she
Yeah,
really is a remarkable woman, man. I'm so
awesome.
grateful for both of you guys. I joked about this thing way back, like when I first got married. I married my best friend. Jen and I were together since we were 12, and still best friends. I absolutely love her,
She's
and
awesome.
she is amazing. But she had that same feeling about you. The first time that she met you, she said, "Oh my God, he's such an amazing human being." And she crushed on you in a really innocent way, because it was yeah, sorry. I thought I heard Marianne say, "What?" Um, no, we talked about it all the time. I said, if I were to die tomorrow, like Luke's the type of person I would love for you to be with, right? And that, I mean that in a really special way, because there are very few people you meet in your life where you think, I would love for my partner to be with someone like that, because you can see that they'd be well taken care of. And um, it's neat. I mean, your story with Marianne is really unique and magical. I talked about luck, kind of not, I don't use the word luck a lot, because I feel like people put themselves in situations where things work out. It's a fortunate situation, but so much stuff is sort of self-driven that might not be intentional. But you want to talk about how you and Marianne reconnected?
Yeah, we were really lucky in that regard, in that we both grew up in Livingston, Montana, a little tiny town, and not far from from where you grew up, and we were high school sweethearts. So we went to prom a couple times together, and it was really our first real romance and relationship for each other. So what a special gift and we all have that. We have our first love. And then when I got to college, I was 2 grades ahead of her. We went our separate ways, and she moved to Australia and was an exchange student there, and I was in Bozeman partying with you.
Yeah.
And and then we lost touch with each other for multiple decades.
Decades.
So decades, literally.
A lifetime. Really?
Yes.
That's yeah.
Oh yeah. Parenting, children, careers, all of that, happened separately. And then about 10 years ago, through the magic of social media, we reconnected, and she was living in the Netherlands at the time. I had moved back to Montana, and here she is. She just walked in the door.
Yay!
So.
Hi, how are you? We're getting your whole life story. Can you hear me all right?
Oh, yeah.
I'm just getting I'd asked Luke to talk about your reconnection and just about how there was a lifetime in between. But so she was living in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
It's good to see you, Kevin.
Yeah.
Nice to see you too, Marianne. Take care, hon.
I was just not quite divorced, but I was on the path.
Yeah.
And she was married and living in the Netherlands. And we just kind of loosely kept in touch with each other for the next 3 or 4 years. As fate would have it, we both were dealing with very similar relationship stuff at the same time. And we both experienced divorce. And she just happened to be in Livingston, Montana once for a Christmas party, literally the weekend that my ex-wife was moving out of the house.
Wow.
So,
hello.
Yeah.
Koopy. Koopy. Hi, baby.
Choop. And so we met just really quickly in a bar, and we had the magic. I mean, I saw her for maybe 5 minutes, literally. But that 5-minute connection was, we knew, wow, that spark is still there. We still appreciate that about each other. And then over the next 3 years after that, we got back together. And
wow.
and we didn't want to waste any time. We thought, we need to be married, and we're going to spend the rest of our lives together. We got lucky. I really think it's luck.
It's hard to, I'm not sure that I dislike or I have a love-hate relationship with the word, I guess, because I've always considered myself to be the luckiest man on the planet. I feel like so many opportunities have come my way that maybe I didn't deserve, but I put myself in a situation that it happened in a good way. But, and that might be with you guys too. The life brought you several chapters along the way to get you to where you were, to be ready for that, right? You were emotionally prepared for it. And I think a lot of my friends that are watching these, we're all in a similar situation, right? Where maybe there was some barrier to allow us to be able to break through, where we could find our identity, we could let go of some of that stuff in the past. And so it's always nice to hear both success stories that are working for people, but also, techniques and processes and things that people use. And
yeah, for sure.
I'm grateful for the diversity of friends that I have. I'm grateful for the commonalities, because I think, you and I have some of those common things. And mostly, I think I'm just grateful to have really important people in my life that are really focused on what matters, and that to me is it's just so special, man. I think it means a lot, even that, you'd take an afternoon just to talk about your inspiration, and maybe some of our past and our history. We've got so many silly stories, that we just reminisced and it went down memory lane.
Go there. Yeah.
I know, but I'm grateful for it. This is the kind of stuff that you and I value, in you. So let's.
I feel the same way, Kevin. And one thing, I don't have a big circle of friends, and I'm great with that. I have very important people in my life. You, of course, are one of those in my most inner sphere. And one thing you were touching about the length of our relationship, our friendship over so long. One thing I'm so grateful for with you and I is that we have seen each other at our highest highs and our lowest lows.
Amen.
And we might go a year without talking to each other, but we have communicated during those times, both the good and the bad.
Yeah.
And that is rare, man. We are so lucky to know each other in different decades and different stages of our life. I wouldn't trade that for the world, and especially with you, man.
Thank you.
I love you. I
love you too. Let's just continue to do this so we have another conversation when we're 70. We're talking about, remember?
Hell yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, I can't thank you enough for being who you are, man. I really love you.
Feelings mutual. And thank you. I don't mean to change the subject, but I'm really grateful that you've pivoted here, and you're a rock star on the road, but a pandemic happens and you have retooled and created this awesome community. And it's been so cool to watch these interviews, because it's not just celebrities and famous people that you've crossed paths with in your life. Every one of these that I've watched, you are special to those people. It's not just an acquaintance. And that is so beautiful to watch. It's a huge community, and you're in the hub of that. And I'm grateful to be part of that. I really am. And I'm grateful to the people that you've introduced me to on these. So cool. Thank you.
Right on, buddy. Well, that's what this is all about. This is just to develop those important connections and let go of the ones that aren't, so
right.
Yeah, I want you to go and you squeeze your bride for me, and hug your kiddos and chupa chup, give them a little pat. But
I'll do that.
Awesome. Thank you, my friend. I look forward to seeing you next month at Flathead Lake.
Hope so. Yes, let's
awesome.
Do it.
Beautiful. All right, buddy.
All right.
Thank you so much, man. And happy early Father's Day. Hey, how you doing?
Stepdaughter right here. Here's Olivia.
Hi, Olivia. Good to see you.
Here's another one.
I love your band. You're a celebrity.
I had a feeling that might have been the case. Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm very fortunate to get that.
You're
He is a celebrity. In your own house, you're never a celebrity. I'll tell you that much. I bet you, Luke's got some videos of us playing in the day. You'll see what the real rock story is right there. That guy. That's the truth.
He's pretty good too. I love your band though.
Thank you.
You know from me.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
That's my daughter Stella, right?
I know, Stella. I haven't seen you for a long time. How you doing, hon?
Pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing well. You're just about ready for summer, huh?
Yes.
Yeah. Are you sick of Zoom classes yet? Google Classroom?
Yeah, very.
Yeah. It's kind of like what we're doing right here. I feel like I'm going to school with Luke right now. So yeah.
I would do this with you again in a heartbeat. So.
Yeah, buddy. If I could do this 24 hours a day, I would. But listen, I hope you guys have a wonderful summer. And Luke, I will see you, Luke, at Dave Rumman's wedding, my friend. We'll see another beautiful brother of ours. And another success story.
That's right.
All right, you guys. Love you. Take care.
I'll get to meet you someday. Nice to see you.
I'll see. Okay.
We'll meet you in a month.
Okay. Awesome. All right, you guys. Take care.
Take care, brother.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.